The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SpotTrack.com podcast. I'm Kevin Sylvester, along with the founder of SpotTrack.com, Mike Giannetti. Paul Peck's on assignment, so we miss him this week. Not really. No, but you know what? It takes a couple people to make up for Paul Peck's absence, and one of them is Adam Schefter from ESPN. He will join us in a few minutes here on the SpotTrack.com podcast, so we're looking forward to our conversation with Adam Schefter. But first, let's talk about all the action that's happened. Official free agency, the last time we were together, it was prior to the official free agent period where a lot of things were consummated, right? We knew things that were going to happen. Like we knew Kirk Cousins to Minnesota, but then they actually get to sign Kirk Cousins to Minnesota.
Yeah, we were kind of in the belly of the beast there on last Tuesday in terms of how this free agency period kind of hashed out because, come Thursday when the actual league year started, it was, sort of radio silence.
That's right.
Everybody kind of knew where the dominoes were falling, and we really, in terms of my piece of it, it was just kind of finding the details, which is the most important part of the piece, by the way. It's, you hear the reports, you hear the values, you hear, who's going where, but actually diving into these contracts and finding out the true guarantees and things like that. That's where I start to put my work into, and that's really where I'm hoping, our audience is putting their efforts as well, because it's the true contract. It's the nuts and bolts of how these things kind of hashed out, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here.
Yeah, and the Cousins contract, it's a true contract. There's a couple of incentives in there.
Yeah, there's actually additional incentives. So the $84 million is all his. He can book it to the budget and start spending it if he wants.
Just think about that for a second, right?
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just astonishing.
Yeah. Where do you go first, right? That's the big question.
He probably already has everything, right?
Yeah. It's not like he was a poor man's game the last 2 years in Washington. So
that's right. Yeah. So it's kind of like, well, okay, we can get the Bentley we wanted. No, get another one.
Yeah. We did a piece, I think Thursday or Friday at Spot Track, where we kind of hashed out a 5-year span of pay. And only Matthew Stafford is on a better track to make more money than Kirk Cousins over the last 5 years from 2016 to 2019. It's an incredible situation for him. I mean, obviously, he went through the ringer on those franchise tags, and certainly there was a situation where Washington didn't want to confirm or lock him down, and maybe vice versa from what we're hearing. But he's locked in for 3 years. It's a true 3-year contract, and $84 million is in the bank for him. So
that was a surprising deal. Yeah. Not that he went to Minnesota, but the $84 million, and we'll talk to Adam Schefter about that deal and another special guest too when it comes to that deal. What other deals surprised you as far as the numbers were concerned with free agents?
Yeah, I think a few of them were just non-quarterback positions at this point. That the deal for Tremaine Johnson that the Jets put down to paper was pretty phenomenal. I mean, similar situation, back-to-back franchise tags with the Rams, sort of kicked to the curb in Los Angeles because of the age and because they were looking to get younger and maybe a fresher look there. But man, he did well to leave town because the Jets pulled him in for $45 million guaranteed over the course of 2 years. That's a 2-year 45 in terms of how that lays out. And it's a $72.5 million contract in total value. So he's going to be the guy. He's the next Darrelle Revis for that Jets team. He's brought in to kind of quarterback that secondary, and it's a big payday. So that's I'd say in terms of the non-quarterbacks, that's at the top of the list. And then the second, to stay in the AFC East, is the deal that Nate Solder got to leave the Patriots. A lot of people thought the Patriots had to lock him in and keep him as the blindside offensive tackle for Tom Brady for the next few years. But the Giants came in swing, and they brought in the highest valued average offensive lineman contract in NFL history for Nate Solder. We're talking about a situation where he's worth $15.5 million a year, $35 million guaranteed right up front, set in stone. So that's at least a 3-year deal. It's a 4-year deal on paper, but the Giants have their left tackle, and they're going forward with that. But I think the most interesting piece will be, is Eli Manning the quarterback for the next 2-3 years to go with Nate Solder? But, we'll have another conversation about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll have to find that out in the draft, what they do. Sammy Watkins' deal was... Yeah.
I woke up to that one, and I didn't even have my coffee yet, so I had to sit down and kind of digest that one because... we're a Buffalo-based show here, and we've seen plenty of Sammy Watkins, and I think we sort of broke that last Tuesday when this came down, But man, it's not so much that it's 3 years, that it's $48 million, because like I said, that can be funny money a lot of times. But Sammy Watkins gets $30 million guaranteed right up front, right now. Huge signing bonus, big first salary. The spread out over 2 years is really nice. That's a new Chiefs regime right now. That's a situation where they never paid a wide receiver for a dime, and they never threw a touchdown pass, to go with it. So they're a new regime, a new front office, and Andy Reid certainly made it clear that he wants a legitimate number one wide receiver and a veteran to boot to go with a young core. I mean, when you put on paper what that offense is going to look like, and even financially, we're going to do a lot with that over this spring here. But you've got a dirt cheap Patrick Mahomes in terms of his rookie contract. You've got Kareem Hunt. You've got Tyreek Hill. You've got Kelsey on a pretty decent deal for a tight end, and now you've got Watkins, who's the sort of the grandfather here. The old man with the massive payday. Sort of reeling it all together. And that Chiefs offense looks pretty good on paper, but man, did they pay Watkins?
Yeah, they certainly did, and but they're paying on potential. It's not about
right.
what he's done.
He's young. Yeah, he's got great hands. He's got speed. He just can't stay on the field for more than 4 weeks. So
right.
that's to me, that's the red flag with that money.
Well, but great deep threat, likes to get the deep ball, and Mahomes has the rocket.
Look, if it all works, they're going to be as exciting as this Eagles team and this Rams team we saw last year. So they're certainly putting a formula together, in terms of how this is working, and he's sort of the final cog in that wheel. But if he's healthy and this works, there's going to be no complaints.
All right, one more before we get to Adam Schefter. How about Malcolm Butler, who goes from not seeing a down in the Super Bowl, going to the Tennessee Titans and guaranteed $30 million.
The Titans are a bit puzzling for me because the Titans sort of came full circle in the last 18 months, right? They let the big free agent go last year in terms of A.J. Bowie, right? They let him walk. They bring in Malcolm Butler, and last year they brought in Logan Ryan from the Patriots. So they're essentially saying, all right, if the Patriots don't want their secondary, we'll take them because they're good enough for us. What's good for the goose is not good for the gander. But they are paying some serious money to these two cornerbacks. We're talking a combined $60 million guaranteed at signing over the past 2 years for Butler and Logan Ryan. It's a situation where they just don't want to think about the secondary because they've made a lot of changes in terms of their safeties. They've gotten some cheap weapons there. They want shutdown corners in a league that's certainly a passing league. So it's a formula that seems to be okay. I mean, that's certainly an area to pay. Quick, decent-sized cornerbacks. For multiple years, they can probably, pay it and forget about it at this point. But they've got a lot of holes to fill in that team. They really do. They've got other areas to fill, and their draft pick isn't fantastic. So I'm worried they swung a little too high with Butler and took away too much of their cap space to do a lot of damage going forward. But we'll see how it hashes out in the next couple of weeks here.
Yeah, that kind of money, the Butler better do it down in Tennessee.
Yeah, he will not be sitting on the bench there.
No, he certainly will not. All right, so, we, and I mean Mike, tracks all the money for you at SpotTrack.com. So somebody who follows all the transactions and then looks at the money, well, we'll find out how he does it, is Adam Schefter from ESPN, and here's our conversation with Adam. Adam, we really appreciate the time, given that your phone probably gets buzzed 50 times a second this time of year.
That's okay. I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much, Kevin and Mike.
Michael, why don't you start off, because I know you got a ton of questions when it comes to money with Adam Schefter. Not how much you make, but how much everybody else makes. Adam.
Yeah, Adam. So I actually want to start off with your busy job and what you're doing all day long, and really just how that sort of evolved over the years here. I would imagine maybe 5-6 years ago, doing what you're doing was less daunting in terms of the financial side of it. I'm going to have to guess, and please speak to this, but this time of year, you're diving into the financial details as much as I am with SpotTrack, and that's a part of your process now going forward.
Well, you guys do a tremendous job of breaking it down and keeping track of financials. And, I'm interested in financials, of course, to a certain extent. You guys go more in depth on that. This is how you make a living, so to speak, and how you differentiate yourselves. Me, again, I think I like to think of it as, I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'm touching on a little bit of who's signing where, and a little bit of financials and some injuries and some trades. So a little bit of everything. But, this is what you guys specialize in. And now it's a situation where, again, many of the numbers are interesting. But like I said, you guys make a living off that. So that's what you do.
So in your process, when you're reporting on which players are going where, releases, you're looking at the football side of things first, and then do you look into the money to see where it fits and how it fits?
Yeah, well, sometimes the money is accessible, and sometimes it's not, as you guys know. Sometimes you can get those figures and information quicker than you can others. And, like I said, you guys do a great job breaking that down, and I appreciate some of the guidance from you guys. But it's a situation where I'm not spending my time going over the particulars of Kirk Cousins' contract as interesting as it might be to a lot of people.
Well, and that contract was interesting because it's all guaranteed. Did that blow you away that much money was guaranteed? Because it's been really the first time that amount of cash was locked in and loaded for a quarterback, guaranteed.
It didn't surprise me because it's a case where this was about supply and demand, and there was a great demand for his services. And so they were able to command what they wanted from other people. So to me, no, that did not surprise me in terms of what they got done for Kirk Cousins. I think that when you've got that many teams interested and you've got a 29-year-old quarterback in free agency, you don't see 29-year-old quarterbacks with starting experience who have a clean medical bill hit free agency. It just doesn't happen that way. And in this particular case, it did, and so here we go.
Yeah, Adam, I actually want to stay right there and kind of have you speak to that because, the process that got Kirk Cousins to free agency was interesting, questionable. I mean, kind of put the label you want on it, but, it all kind of wraps itself back to the franchise tag, which has become maybe more of a detriment to some teams in terms of how it's being used, whereas the CBA was originally written to have it, more as a placeholder for teams. They'll keep their guys in-house. And I think the financials for it have gotten so big that it's kind of gone to a different place. So maybe if you can just speak to how that's kind of hashed out here over the past couple of years.
Well, what happened was it was introduced back in the 90s. I was coming to the Denver Broncos back then. Pat Bowlen, the great Broncos owner, was one of the ones who fought for a tag like that to keep his guy in place so that the Broncos couldn't lose John Elway. And the Miami Dolphins wanted the same thing with Dan Marino. And so that's where the tag was born from, was to prevent a player like an Elway or a Marino from leaving that market. They wanted to avoid that in every potential way. And so that's what you have there. Is a situation where those teams wanted to make sure that their main franchise guy would not leave, and so that's where the tag was born from. Yeah,
and players seem insulted by the tag, even though it guarantees them they're going to get a very nice payday for 1 year, but they want that multiple-year contract, so Mike can put it up at SpotTrack.com, in there with the value. I want to talk about with Kirk Cousins and the quarterbacks this year and what occurred. On March 13th, like all the movement in the tampering period, if you will, before that. It was an exciting day for fans. What was it like from your perspective, having to follow everything go along and break the news and report on what was happening?
Well, I think it's a case where on those days, it gets to be, you're just honestly just trying to keep up with everything to make sure that you're able to track all the news. There's so many transactions that occur. It's such a busy time of the year. There's so much to do. But the fact of the matter is that basically it's a job to keep up with who's getting a job and where. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say, with the dominoes when they started to fall, and did you have an idea going into it because of some of the trades that had happened, the Smith trade, the Tyrod Taylor trade from Buffalo to Cleveland, that started eliminating some of the teams? Did that help keep track of just that one position so it made you could spend time on the other positions going elsewhere?
The quarterbacks are always such a big deal, and the Case Keenum domino came down Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, and it was busy and hectic. And once that one went down, you knew that Kirk Cousins was only going to go to a certain number of places, so that was interesting. And, again, then the other quarterbacks sort of fell into an unpredictable place, like Sam Bradford to Arizona and A.J. McCarron to Buffalo. And Josh McCann and Teddy Bridgewater, the Jets. And there was a race that was on to get these quarterbacks in-house. And obviously it fell out the way it did, which led to the weekend trade, which is a big trade, and the continued quarterback market fallout that we're seeing time and time again.
Hey, Adam, one of the things we're tracking at Spot Trek is we're doing a lot of research in terms of how the players are actually moving and being acquired and things like that. And really what's coming forward is the past 3 years, trades have become just a more vital piece for teams in terms of circumventing this cap, getting the pieces they need, in addition to the draft, which is obviously a slower process. What's your take on that? I mean, obviously from your end, you're seeing, these trades kind of pile up, and it's really a year-long thing. It's not just now, and it's not just at the deadline. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, the one thing that I have noticed, and I've covered the NFL now for 28 years,
wow.
But the one thing I've noticed is that there's been a blurring of when events used to occur or do occur. There used to be a predictable rhythm to it where coaches got fired basically the last week of the season and then right when the regular season ended. And GMs got fired right around there too. And trades would come off right before the deadline. And now you've got a GM in Kansas City fired the last weekend in June, which is typically one of the quietest times in the NFL. You've got a GM fired on the eve of training camp in Carolina, which never happened before. You've got quarterback being traded Super Bowl week. I don't remember the last time there was a big trade that was agreed to in the week of the Super Bowl. You've got moves that are made around the calendar. The trade this weekend between the Colts and the Jets, that's a trade that when the Rams and Titans made the move, if my memory serves me correctly, it was the first week in April.
Right.
And then the Eagles and Browns went the next week. So everything seems to have moved up. There really is no predictable rhythm to moves being made anymore. They just happen year-round. And you never know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. But that's what the league has become. You've got a lot of very aggressive people. You've got a strong interest in the fan base. You've got a league that never rests, and the end result is enough fodder to give all of us material to talk about for an awful long time.
I was going to ask, how do you plan a family vacation with that when anything can happen?
That's very simple. You don't go on vacation. My wife and I were celebrating our 10-year anniversary when John Dorsey got fired. We just landed in Nantucket for a weekend. We hadn't had a weekend away in about 4 years. And it just landed, and I spent the next 5 hours on the phone. And that's just the way that it is.
Well, that's why she knew a long time ago, right? That's the deal. That's why she's a keeper. That's why you're celebrating an anniversary with that, Adam. What do you expect with this draft? The Jets move. Do you expect more dominoes to fall now with teams needing to get up, and maybe the Giants hold the biggest chip right now in the NFL draft?
Yeah, listen, the Jets set a market here, and you know what? The teams that would like to come up, I would think, would be Buffalo, mainly, maybe Arizona. You don't know if there's another sleeper team that wants to come up. I don't think anybody makes a trade up for anything other than a quarterback, including the Jets. The idea that somebody would trade up for Saquon Barkley, as great as he is, I just don't see that. I think that's a ridiculous notion. You trade up for a quarterback and a quarterback only this far out from the draft. You're not trading up, 5-6 weeks out because of a running back. That's just not happening. So, the Jets went up there to go get a quarterback, and I think if the Giants are willing to move back, it'll be for a team that wants to come up to get a quarterback. But no matter how it goes, I think we're looking at the very least 2 quarterbacks going in the first 3 picks, and maybe quarterbacks going with all 3 first picks.
Yeah, Adam, I agree on the running back take. We did a piece last week where I was actually breaking down if the Browns had taken him number 1 overall, he would immediately... Which they were never going to, by the way. Right, but if they had done it, he would become the highest average paid running back in football right out of the gate. So, just in thinking in terms of the money, it's just outrageous that, for a 4-year contract, you're getting no value right from the start, All right, final question, Adam. Final question.
Yeah, the value, as you guys know, is in the quarterback. If you get a quarterback early, you not only set your franchise up for the next 12 to 15 years, but you give yourself an enormous financial advantage for the next 4 or 5 years as well.
You got it. That's the point of it. All right, final question. You're on the clock 24/7, as you just made note of. What happens during Michigan basketball?
Well, the iPhones are in your hands, and if somebody, in Dominican Sue, wants to sign on Thursday night at 7:37 Eastern when Michigan tips off against Texas A&M. That's the way it goes.
Are you calling your shot?
Priority. That takes a priority over anything that's recreational.
Yep.
News. That's just very important. The one thing that I have found is, like on Saturday morning, I'm at the groomer, or not the groomer, the vet with my dogs. One of my dogs got stitches in his tail. Another one has an ear infection. And I'm sitting there in the lobby trying to fend off dogs, and I get some text that this trade is going to be going down. Be on the lookout. What's the trade? You'll see. And boom, there it is. It shows up on Twitter. The Jets and Colts report it. I'm trying to cut and paste unsuccessfully while I'm holding two dogs, and they're trying to attack other dogs. And you're in the groomer, and it was just. It was a chaotic scene, so that's sort of the way it goes. But that's life, and that's what we deal with, and that's part of what we do.
Well, you do it well, Adam. One of the best, if not the best, in the business. We appreciate your time, your valuable time here at this. I'd say this time of year, but it's any time of year for you. But hopefully, you get a chance to make up for those 5 hours that were interrupted by the Dorsey firing. Thanks for your time, Adam. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me. Kevin, Mike, have a great day.
Well, we continue our NFL talk, and why not talk to the guy who just made the biggest deal in free agency, and that is agent Mike McCartney, who is Kirk Cousins' agent, among many others that Mike's had the pleasure of putting the numbers in at Spotrac.com. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on what has to have been a fantastic week for you and your company.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be on with you, and it was a whirlwind for sure. A great week, though.
I'm sure the conversations and possibilities were numerous for Kirk Cousins. Just kind of give us a little background on your conversation with Kirk on which direction or directions he had an option of going.
Well, we knew once the trade for Alex Smith was announced Super Bowl week to the Redskins that there was a great chance that Kirk would finally hit unrestricted free agency. And really leading up to that point, I had, with the help of Kyle Dolan in my office, of another agent, we had spent a lot of time researching, in particular, 7 teams, and just in anticipation of who could possibly be interested if Kirk were to hit the open market. And we looked at a lot of different things. We looked at the rosters. We looked at the coaching staffs. We looked at the draft history. We looked at their salary cap. Certainly any contracts they had done. We tried to have a real thorough statistical analysis on their squad from really a 3-year period. And as we put that book together, Kirk, leaving the Super Bowl, was getting ready to head on vacation. So I made sure that the book was ready for him on the long plane ride. So he had some reading material and said, hey, you take the next 2 weeks and really kind of dive into it. And I always told him the 2 most important ingredients for me were I wanted him to jump out of bed excited to walk into a building, into a quarterback room, into a great culture where he was excited and thought there was a great chance to win. And at the end of the day, to walk home or get home to a happy home, a home that was flourishing. And I just felt like if we could marry those 2 together, then that would be a good job. So I didn't really get into what was most important to him. I figured, he could, figure that out on his own. So we just spent our time really talking through teams and the different relationships and just what we thought about each of those clubs.
Hey, Mike, you hit on a note there that I want to expand on a little bit, and it's something I talk about at Spotrac quite often in the last few months here, and it's the notion of the 3-year contract. And I heard you say that you did a 3-year analysis in terms of how the teams were laying out future-wise. Is that a direction we're going? I mean, certainly, the big contracts, the big free agent splashes, in years past were the 5-year deals and even 6-year deals for these defensive guys. But are we getting to an area where these 3 to 4 year deals, mostly fully guaranteed, certainly fully guaranteed with Kirk, is that a direction that players want to go? Is that a direction you want to take players?
I think it's real attractive to me personally. When you really look at these deals, the first thing I look at is what years are guaranteed, whether it's fully or practically. And so when you get a 5-year deal, typically you get 2 years of guarantee money, and then you get 3 1-year team options. And players are, of course, vulnerable, and we see players being released, all the time. So if you could maximize that guarantee in late in the years, then that would be a win for a player. This was an ideal situation. It's hard to get a great player to the market. It's rare. And we were fortunate that at the most important position, we were able to get one to the market and capitalize on the shorter deal. I think the second piece to the shorter deal in this particular case is the funding rule of the NFL. Make it more difficult on clubs. So I can remember in conversation, not even sure what team said, well, would you do a 4-year deal? And I said, well, of course, if you want to fund a 4th year and fully guarantee it. And they said, well, yeah, we can't do that. So really, it's the 3-year made sense in a lot of ways just because of the funding rules.
Okay, and kind of piggybacking off that question, I'm not sure how much you actually dove into the cap part of Kirk Cousins' deal or any of these deals you've done here over the past week, all of which are exciting, I would imagine. But one of the things that I've been starting to track in terms of how the cap figures and such are laid out is the percent of that in terms of the league cap. And really with the quarterback, it seems that the 16% mark appears to be where we're living with these big, elite quarterback deals. Is that something you take into consideration when you're working with these teams? Is that something teams are asking for in terms of how they want things structured?
I don't think teams are wanting to talk about that at all, to be honest with you. I think that's something that we're trying to talk more and more about, as in particular. In our office, we do look at that. We study it all the time. What we have to do is balance with the different clubs, what their offers are. And, in Minnesota's case, it just felt like they were at their limit. And, you can make a case looking back at how much percentage of cap so-and-so got in previous years and where you want to get to that point. But there's also a limit where teams can go at some point. So we just felt like with Minnesota we were at that limit. That's something that we talked about. And people are asking me, what's next with these contracts and can players build off of a fully guaranteed deal? And my answer is, I hope so. And if they can, great. If they can't, maybe they can build off percentage of cap. And that would be a great next step for players as well.
Mike, how much do you advise your clients on, you help them get these tremendous deals and a large amount of money. How much do you advise them on what to do with the money once they sign the contract?
I'm real fortunate in that I get really high character guys that are very intelligent. It's just how it's worked out for me. And so when I recruit them out of college, they also, besides hiring Priority Sports, they hire a financial advisor. In some cases, I'll have some communication with a financial advisor. In some cases, I won't. In Kirk's case, he's an extremely intelligent guy, very bright, and he's had a plan all along. So I honestly rarely get involved with that piece of it.
All right, Mike, final question, and we appreciate you joining us once again. In terms of how your week has gone here, you've obviously had Kirk Cousins and Josh McCown under contract, and then there's been a few non-quarterbacks. And really, if you can just kind of speak to the difference in negotiating a quarterback contract versus a non-quarterback in this modern age here.
Well, the interesting thing about the quarterback market last week is, I think Kirk was the first one to go, and then when the ESPN report, maybe it was NFL Network, either way, when the reports came out that we had agreed to visit Minnesota first, and Tuesday was a crazy day from a free agent standpoint because there probably weren't enough quarterbacks to fill all the chairs, so teams were really pushing to get guys to, agree to a contract. And so I think Tuesday accelerated the rest of the starting quarterbacks, whether they were, starters or bridge starters. With the offensive lineman, Ryan Jensen ended up signing with Tampa Bay. That was a little different in that, there were multiple teams involved, and they all made early offers on Monday. And by the end of the day, I knew I had a real strong market. So I went back to each team and just said, hey, we got to step up a little more before we decide kind of where to go from here. When you're in the open market, every player is different. It just, a lot of it depends on how many teams are involved, how aggressive teams are. I'm personally a big believer that we can get really close in dollars, but a player needs to go in the building, sit down with the coaching staff, meet the people involved, get a feel for culture before we really finalize a deal. And I'm in Ryan Jensen's case, I'm very appreciative that both Tampa Bay and Indy visited him and agreed not to negotiate and to let him out of the building. Most times when a player walks in, a team's mindset is we're not going to let him out of the building. In this case, they both allowed that opportunity for Ryan to complete his visit, and then he went home and made a decision. So every guy's different, every team's different, and there's something to be said about doing this year in and year out to get a feel for each team and how they operate.
Well, that's a neat insight there on how they were able to let him go home and make a decision. Final thing I have for you, Mike, and we really appreciate your time here. What prospects for April's draft do you have in the first round? Do you have any guys we should look out for?
I don't think I have a first-rounder. Kyle Lauletta, the Richmond quarterback, has had a great offseason. He started with a terrific Senior Bowl and has continued it with the combine and some personal workouts and his pro day as well. So hopefully it's going to be the whole quarterback thing will be fascinating in that first round, and I think that there's going to be a couple more guys in that second round, for sure, that third-round area. So it'll be fun to watch. All
right, great stuff. Mike, thank you for your time. Congratulations on what's been a great offseason so far for Priority Sports and Entertainment, and I'm sure that will continue.
I really appreciate you guys. Michael and Kevin, have a great day.
Well, great stuff there, Mike, from Mike McCartney. I hope people appreciate, it was brief that we had both Adam Schefter and Mike McCartney on, but, we're still in the throes of NFL free agency, right? Yeah. So these guys are super busy, and they took 10 minutes each out of their day, and you could hear them both working away.
Yeah. I myself am sitting here watching contract numbers come up in front of me, and I'm, getting ready to pass out with all the work I have to do after this. But
yeah, well, he mentioned a couple things with Mike, by the way. If you're wondering, yes, there is a relation to former Colorado Buffaloes head coach Bill McCartney. Mike is his son, and helped him there, and went on to a career in college coaching, pro scout for the Bears, worked in joined the Eagles as a director of pro personnel, so he's got that inside knowledge before becoming an agent, which sometimes it's the reverse, right? The agent helps, in the front office in a GM there. And I didn't want to bring up we had such limited time with them.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't want to waste it on the Colorado Buffaloes, but if you've seen the 30 for 30 on them, go watch it. It's outstanding. Yeah, outstanding.
Some insight into how that family's worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's certainly true. What's interesting, we talk about the Kirk Cousins deal, but that Jensen deal for two centers have signed big money, right?
Big. The trenches are getting money. They really are. It's been a nice year for the offensive linemen. I think really what we're seeing is that was one of the deeper free agent markets out there. The wide receiver group wasn't great. You had to overpay for guys that were questionable at best.
Sure.
And, obviously the quarterbacks dominated everything, but we saw a bit of a dip with even the pass rushers in terms of how that money came down. Any kind of red flags on these guys passed, and the money dropped in half.
Right.
Muhammad Wilkerson, Sheldon Richardson. My goodness.
The biggest money for defensive tackle was Buffalo.
Star Lotulelei,
Yeah, Star Lotulelei.
Yeah,
so,
which might be an overpay by the end of it. The way everything else is hashing out here. So we'll have to see where that ranks in terms of defensive contracts this offseason.
Well, will Sue get more?
I would have to imagine Sue gets more than $10 million. I valued him at 14 without even trying, really. He's coming off, the top defensive contract in terms of the defensive lineman. He's still playing great. He's still a great player. He's not crazy old in terms of how the defensive linemen stack up. So
is the money there for him, though?
Yeah, it's got to be the right team. I'm hearing Dallas, which no way in terms of money. No way. Right. No way Philly. No way Pittsburgh in terms of their salary cap.
Sure.
So unless they're planning on cutting the rest of the defensive line to accommodate him,
well, San Fran's a team with the money, right?
San Fran can do it. Cleveland can certainly do it. I think the Saints can make it work. I think that's maybe the logical team. I've heard that he's been there. I think that's a team that wants him. I think they can make it work financially if they, get rid of some fat in terms of their cap. But that's definitely one to watch. It's probably unarguably the top free agent available still in the market here. So that's the one to watch in terms of the dollars and cents.
All right, great week. It has been in the National Football League. Real quick, Mike, the other sport, baseball, are we still starting to see something there?
We
hopefully
are.
soon. We're a month away.
I mean,
Less than a month away.
Well, a week and a half away. March 29th, 10 days.
That's true.
10 days. Yeah, I'm on pins and needles here. In terms of the numbers, the free agents have pretty much kind of filed in. It's been small deals for, way less money than we all anticipated coming into this thing. But, we've got a lot of the pre-arbitration salaries in Spotrac now, so the rosters are starting to round out in terms of how the payrolls are stacking up. That's something we'll continue to finalize this last week here. And then hopefully this time next week, we'll be doing a baseball episode here and talking about all the money of baseball for the 2018 season and how that's going to shape going forward. Yeah,
and if your kid's a lefty, have him pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Pitchers.
Absolutely. He'll be on Spotrac for many, many, many years to come if he's a left-hander and can throw. All right. Hope you enjoyed the special guest on this edition of the Spotrac.com podcast. For the founder of Spotrac.com, Mike Giannetti, I'm Kevin Sylvester. Thanks for joining us.